She stood alone, refused the call. A salute denied that shocked them all. Whispered words that chilled the air. A name unleashed frozen stares out in a town where silence ruled the day. One brave soul dared break away. This is her fight, her rise, her truth, a story of courage, strength, and proof. If you're ready to hear a story of courage and truth that will leave you inspired, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Don't forget to hit that bell icon so you never miss a powerful story like this one. Now, let's dive into the story of Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, the woman who refused to salute, whispered a name that shook them all, can change everything forever. In the quiet town of Millbrook, nestled deep in the heartland of America, life moved at its own steady pace. The sprawling military base at its edge was both a source of pride and quiet tension. For decades, the base had been the town's heartbeat, its rhythms woven tightly into the fabric of everyday life. But beneath the disciplined rows of barracks and the proud flyovers, there were whispers of old wounds, of injustice, and of battles that no one fought openly. At the center of this storm was Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, a woman known by most for her sharp mind and quiet strength. She was not the kind to seek attention, yet the moment she stepped onto the base, her presence was impossible to ignore. Not because she was loud or boastful, quite the opposite, but because of the fire she carried inside, a fire that refused to be dimmed. Sarah had grown up in Millbrook, the daughter of a decorated war veteran who had taught her the value of courage, honor, and resilience. But unlike many others, Sarah never sought the easy path. She had joined the military not to follow footsteps, but to carve her own path in a world that was still not quite ready to welcome women like her. Her early days at the base were rough. The officers, many hardened by years of tradition, saw her as a challenge, an anomaly. They whispered behind her back, mocked her in hushed tones, and dismissed her ideas. The jokes weren't loud, but they cut deep. "What's a little lady doing in command?" some sneered. Maybe she should stick to filing reports. But Sarah never flinched. She carried their scorn like armor, her gaze steady and her resolve unwavering. Then came the day that changed everything. The base was holding a formal inspection. The general, a towering figure with decades of service etched into every wrinkle on his face, was there to review the troops. His name was General Bradford, a man revered and feared in equal measure. Sarah had been given a rare honor to lead the squad that would march in front of him. As the soldiers lined up, gleaming in their crisp uniforms, Sarah stood at the front, head held high. The general strode forward, his eyes scanning the rows with the precision of a hawk. When he reached Sarah, he stopped and barked the order, "Salute!" The soldiers around her snapped their salutes, the sharp crack of their arms slicing through the silence. But Sarah did not move. A hush fell over the crowd. The general's eyes narrowed, his mouth tightening. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he said, voice low but firm, "why aren't you saluting?" Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, but her voice was calm when she answered, "Because I cannot, sir." "Explain yourself," the general demanded. And then, softly but clearly, Sarah whispered a name that had been buried in silence for too long. The name slipped from Sarah's lips like a cold wind cutting through the summer heat. Captain Reynolds. A ripple went through the assembled troops and officers. General Bradford's face paled, his eyes widening just a fraction before narrowing. "Again, what did you say?" he demanded. Sarah stood her ground, refusing to look away. "Captain Reynolds, sir. The man you praised as a hero, the one who led with honor. He covered up what happened in Clearwater." The murmurs grew louder. The base, the town, had always spoken of Captain Reynolds as a flawless officer, a shining example of military valor. But Sarah's words shattered that image. General Bradford's jaw clenched. "Lieutenant, you are accusing a decorated officer of misconduct? I am, sir, and I have proof. Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled out a worn envelope, its edges frayed from months of careful handling. Inside were documents, testimonies from whistleblowers, reports of misconduct that had been buried deep in the military archives. The evidence painted a grim picture of cover-ups, abuses, and lives ruined in silence. For years, Reynolds had manipulated the system to protect himself and his cronies, silencing those who dared to speak up. And General Bradford, despite his reputation, had turned a blind eye or worse, had helped conceal the truth. The general took the envelope, his hands trembling slightly as he thumbed through the papers. The crowd held its breath. For the first time, the veneer of infallibility surrounding the base's leadership cracked. Why did you wait so long to come forward? Bradford's voice was rough, edged with something between anger and disbelief. Sarah's eyes flickered with pain and determination. Because I was afraid. Because the system is built to protect people like Reynolds and punish those like me who try to break the silence. But I couldn't stay quiet anymore. She glanced around at the faces, some shocked, some angry, others ashamed. The soldiers who once mocked her now looked uncertain, the foundation of their trust shaken. Among the crowd, a few faces stood out. Officers who had whispered behind her back now shifted uncomfortably, realizing the depth of what she had uncovered. Some even avoided her gaze. General Bradford looked up, his expression dark but resigned. This changes everything. I will initiate a full investigation. Lieutenant Mitchell, you may have just started a fire we cannot put out. Sarah's heart pounded, but she kept her composure. The battle was far from over. She knew the road ahead would be dangerous threats, backlash, perhaps even exile. But in that moment, standing tall before the very institution that had doubted her, she felt something rare. The first flicker of hope that the salute she refused to give wasn't just about protocol. It was a refusal to honor lies, injustice, and silence. And the name she whispered had shattered a legacy. The room seemed to hold its breath, as if the very walls of the base were waiting to see what would come next. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell stood firm, the weight of the moment settling over her like a heavy cloak. She had taken a step that could end her career, or perhaps finally set things right. General Bradford's eyes lingered on the documents, brows furrowed deeply. For years, he had worn the image of a steadfast, honorable leader. But now, confronted with hard truths, the lines on his face seemed deeper, shadows gathering beneath his eyes. Lieutenant, he said slowly, this ... This will shake the very foundation of this base. Are you prepared for the consequences? Sarah nodded. Sir, I have thought long and hard about this. My family has suffered in silence for years because of what was done here. If exposing this is the price I pay, then so be it. Bradford looked away briefly, then back at her. You may not realize it yet, but you are challenging not only a man, but an entire system. This base is like a small city. Power runs deep, and loyalty can blind even the best of us. She met his gaze. Maybe it's time for that to change. The news spread quickly through the base and the town of Millbrook. Sarah's act of defiance ignited a firestorm. Some praised her bravery. Others condemned her as a troublemaker disrupting the fragile order. At the base's small cafe later that day, Sarah sat alone with her coffee, her mind racing. She was exhausted, but resolute. The silence around her was thick, broken only by the murmurs of soldiers and officers, who now glanced at her with mixed emotions: curiosity, suspicion, even respect. Her closest friend, Sergeant Mike Daniels, approached. Cautiously. Sarah, he said quietly, pulling up a chair, you really stirred the pot today. She smiled faintly, grateful for his presence. Mike had been one of the few who believed in her from the start. Yeah, she admitted. But I don't regret it. The truth needs to come out. Mike sighed. You've got a lot of people angry with you now. You know how this place works. Those in power don't like being exposed. Sarah nodded, her jaw tightening. I'm ready for it. Over the next few weeks, the investigation began. It was slow and painful. The military bureaucracy moved deliberately, and many tried to block or dilute the findings. Sarah found herself at the center of a political storm. She endured whispered insults in the hallways, cold shoulders, and even veiled threats. Some officers tried to discredit her character, spreading rumors about her motives. One afternoon, as she walked past the training grounds, a group of officers jeered. "Think you're some kind of hero, Mitchell?" One sneered. "You're just a troublemaker, a liability." Sarah ignored them, but inside, the weight of their words stung. She thought of her father, who had once told her that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was the choice to act in spite of it. Her resolve hardened at home. Sarah faced battles of a different kind. Her mother worried about the backlash. "Sarah, you don't have to do this alone," she said softly one evening. "This could destroy you." "I have to," Sarah replied, her voice steady but tender. "For Dad, for the others who suffered in silence. I can't turn back now." Her mother reached out, clasping her hand. "Just promise me you'll stay safe." Sarah smiled, grateful for the support. She knew the road ahead was uncertain. But she wasn't walking it alone. As the investigation deepened, more witnesses came forward. Stories of cover-ups, intimidation, and broken lives spilled into the light. The once untouchable Captain Reynolds became a figure of suspicion. General Bradford found himself in a precarious position, forced to confront uncomfortable truths and make difficult decisions. His loyalty to the military institution was tested against the undeniable evidence. One evening, he summoned Sarah to his office. The room was quiet except for the hum of the old ceiling fan. "Lieutenant," he began, "I underestimated you. This base needs someone like you, a voice for justice." Sarah was taken aback. "Thank you, sir." He nodded. "But be careful. Not everyone wants the truth to come out." The tension on base grew palpable. Some soldiers rallied behind Sarah, inspired by her courage. Others clung to old loyalties, resisting change. Sarah found strength in unexpected places, a young private who admired her, a seasoned nurse who shared stories of injustice, even some officers quietly offering support. Each day was a battle, but with every small victory, Sarah's hope grew. Then came the turning point. A secret meeting was leaked to Sarah by an anonymous source, details of a plan to silence her permanently. The very institution she had sworn to serve was conspiring against her. Fear surged through her, but it was quickly replaced by determination. She went public with the information, risking everything. The town of Millbrook rallied around her. The community that once whispered behind closed doors, now shouting their support. At a tense, base-wide assembly, Sarah faced down her critics. Her voice was clear and steady as she spoke of sacrifice, truth, and honor. When she finished, there was a moment of stunned silence. Then applause, not from everyone, but from enough to signal a shift. General Bradford stood and saluted her, his expression somber but proud. The salute was no longer just protocol. It was respect earned through courage and sacrifice. Sarah's journey had transformed the base, the town, and herself. She had faced mockery, threats, and isolation, but she had never wavered. In the end, the name she whispered was not just a challenge to one man's legacy. It was a call for justice that could no longer be ignored. And in that small town on the edge of the heartland, a new chapter had begun. The weeks after the base-wide assembly were some of the hardest Sarah Mitchell had ever faced. The applause she'd received that day marked a turning point, but it was far from the end of her struggle. In fact, It was only the beginning of a long and arduous battle for justice, one that demanded every ounce of her strength and courage. Sarah had expected the backlash to ease after the truth came to light. But the opposite happened. The powerful men who had built their careers on silence and deception were now more desperate than ever to protect themselves. And the base, once a place of order and discipline, became a battlefield of whispers, cold stares, and calculated moves. She spent long hours at the base, poring over evidence, speaking with witnesses, and preparing for the formal hearings that would decide the fate of Captain Reynolds and others implicated. Every day brought new challenges, some subtle, others blatant. One morning, as she walked toward the briefing room, she noticed a group of soldiers standing unusually close together. Their eyes followed her, narrowed with suspicion or outright hostility. One of them, a young officer named Lieutenant Harris, stepped forward, voice low but sharp. "Lieutenant Mitchell," he said, "there's talk you're stirring up trouble for no good reason. You might want to watch your back." Sarah met his gaze without flinching. "If standing for truth is trouble, then I'll wear that label proudly." Harris smirked. "We'll see how long that pride lasts." Despite the intimidation, Sarah found support where she least expected it. During a late-night debrief, Major Collins, a senior officer known for his stern demeanor, pulled her aside. "Mitchell," he said quietly, "you're braver than most. Give you credit for. I've seen things I couldn't ignore anymore. You're not alone in this." Sarah felt a flicker of hope. "Thank you, sir. That means more than you know." The hearings were grueling. Captain Reynolds sat stone-faced, denying everything. But witness after witness came forward with stories of abuse, cover-ups, and manipulation. Sarah's evidence was clear, but the defense fought hard, attempting to discredit her, and the witnesses. At times, Sarah felt the weight of it all crushing her. The pressure, the memories, the fear for what might come next. But every time doubt crept in, she thought of her father's words about courage being the choice to act. Despite fear, she was not fighting just for herself. She was fighting for every soldier who had suffered in silence, for the community of Millbrook, and for the truth that demanded to be heard. Outside the courtroom, the town had rallied in quiet solidarity. The local diner displayed a sign: "Support. It Mitchell. Courage in the face of truth." Neighbors offered her words of encouragement, and even strangers stopped to shake her hand. But Sarah knew this fight wasn't over. The deeper the investigation went, the more secrets emerged. It became clear that the corruption ran deeper than anyone had imagined, tangled with political ambitions, financial interests, and decades of misplaced loyalty. One evening, Sarah returned home to find a letter slipped under her door. The handwriting was unfamiliar, but the message was clear: stop now or face the consequences. She felt the cold rush of fear, but tucked the letter into her jacket pocket and locked the door behind her. Her mother saw the worry in her eyes and hugged her tightly. "You're stronger than you think, Sarah. Remember that." The final day of the hearings arrived, thick with tension. The courtroom was packed with soldiers, officers, townspeople, and journalists. Cameras flashed as Sarah took the stand one last time. She spoke with honesty and strength, recounting her journey, the pain of watching injustice unfold, and her belief in the power of truth. When she finished, the judge paused before delivering the verdict. Captain Reynolds was found guilty of multiple charges related to misconduct and cover-ups. The sentence was severe, a message that corruption would not be tolerated. As the crowd in the courtroom erupted in whispers and gasps, Sarah felt a swell of relief. The battle had been long, but justice had finally been served. General Bradford, watching from the sidelines, nodded at her with quiet respect. The salute he offered then was no longer just a formality. It was an acknowledgment of her strength and sacrifice. In the days that followed, changes swept through the base. New policies were introduced, support systems for whistleblowers strengthened, and a renewed commitment to transparency took hold. Sarah became a symbol, not just of defiance, but of hope. She continued her service, now as a respected leader, mentor, and advocate for those without a voice. Her journey was far from over, but Sarah Mitchell had already won the greatest battle, the battle for truth, justice, and honor in a place that had long been shadowed by silence. And in the heart of Millbrook, her story inspired others to stand tall, speak up, and never give up. The morning light filtered through the blinds of Sarah Mitchell's modest home, casting thin stripes of warmth across the room. The quiet hum of Millbrook waking up outside seemed at odds with the storm that still raged inside her heart. After the court's verdict had brought a measure of justice, Sarah thought the hardest days were behind her. But now, as she sat at the small kitchen table sipping her coffee, she realized the fight was far from over. Justice on paper was one thing. Changing hearts and minds, especially in a town and a base so long entwined with tradition and silence, was another. In the weeks following Captain Reynolds' sentencing, Sarah found herself navigating a new battlefield. She had become a symbol of courage, yes, but also a target. Rumors swirled. Old loyalties hardened into grudges. Invitations to meetings quietly dried up. Even some of her closest allies seemed to hesitate, uncertain how far they could support her without risking their own standing. Her mornings were no longer peaceful. At the base, whispers followed her footsteps. At the grocery store, strangers glanced but kept their distance. One afternoon, as Sarah walked back from the commissary, she heard a group of soldiers laughing loudly nearby. She caught snippets of their conversation, crude jokes, questions about her loyalty, and predictions that she wouldn't last. At Stone, but Sarah pressed forward. She reminded herself of the words her father had shared when she was young. Strength isn't about never falling, Sarah. It's about standing back up when they try to knock you down. Her relationship with General Bradford became complicated. While he had publicly supported the investigation, behind closed doors, his stance was more cautious. He met with Sarah regularly, sometimes offering advice, sometimes warning her of the dangers ahead. One evening, in the dim light of his office, Bradford said, "Lieutenant, you've made enemies who won't give up. They see you as a threat to their power. You need to be careful." Sarah met his eyes steadily. "I've never been more certain of what I'm fighting for. I'm not stepping back." Bradford nodded slowly, a flicker of respect in his gaze. "Then know this. I'll stand with you as long as I can. But don't expect the road ahead to be smooth." At home, Sarah's mother continued to be her rock. Though she worried, she never tried to dissuade her daughter from speaking out. Instead, she became Sarah's refuge, a place where she could let her guard down and feel safe. One quiet night, Sarah confessed her fears. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm strong enough for all of this." Her mother smiled gently. "You are, Sarah. You've got a fire inside you that even the darkest night can't put out." That fire kept Sarah moving forward, even as the base seemed to close ranks against her. Meanwhile, the town of Millbrook was changing too. The trial and revelations had sparked conversations in homes, churches, and cafes. Some residents who had once turned a blind eye now saw the need for accountability, but others clung tightly to old beliefs. Sarah's family faced cold shoulders at church, whispered criticisms at community events. Her father's old friends avoided them, unwilling to acknowledge the shadows in their past. One afternoon, Sarah's mother came home from the market shaken. "They were talking about you again," she said softly, "saying you brought shame on the town." Sarah's heart ached, but she forced herself to smile. "Then it's a good thing I'm not here to make everyone comfortable." At the base, Sarah threw herself into training and mentoring young soldiers. She wanted to lead by example, showing that integrity was the true mark of a soldier. Private Jamie Lewis was one of her most promising recruits, quiet but determined. One afternoon, after a grueling drill, Jamie stayed behind. "Lieutenant," he said nervously, "thank you for believing in me. It means a lot, especially when things get tough." Sarah put a hand on his shoulder. "You're stronger then. You know, Jamie, never let anyone tell you otherwise." Moments like these reminded Sarah why she fought. Not just for herself, but for the future of every soldier who deserved to serve with honor. But the fight took a toll. Late one night, Sarah found herself staring at the ceiling, exhaustion settling deep into her bones. The weight of constant scrutiny, the memories of those who had suffered, and the pressure to be strong all pressed in. She thought of Captain Reynolds, the man who had betrayed their trust, and of the others who had remained silent. She thought of the cost of justice. Would it be enough? One day, a call came from an unexpected source, a retired colonel named Samuel Hayes, a man who had served with Sarah's father years ago. He wanted to meet Dot in a small cafe on the edge of town. Hayes shared stories Sarah had never heard, stories of courage, sacrifice, and the cost of silence. He admitted he had known about the cover-ups, but had been too afraid to speak up. "You've done what many wouldn't dare," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "You've started a healing that we all need." Sarah listened carefully, realizing that change was slow, but it had begun. As months passed, Sarah's leadership was recognized formally. She was promoted, given a role that involved oversight and reform efforts on base. But the promotion came with new challenges. She was now responsible not only for fighting injustice, but for rebuilding trust. Some officers resented the changes, while others embraced them. Sarah navigated the shifting tides with the same quiet strength that had carried her through. One afternoon, during a base ceremony honoring soldiers who had shown exceptional valor, General Bradford called Sarah forward. With a steady voice, he praised her courage, resilience, and dedication. The crowd applauded, some genuinely moved, others reluctant but respectful. Sarah accepted the recognition humbly, thinking back to the day she refused the salute. Her refusal had not been an act of disrespect, but a stand for truth. In the quiet that followed, Sarah looked out over the crowd, feeling the weight and hope of the moment. The path ahead was still uncertain, but for the first time, she believed that justice, once a distant dream, was within reach. And in the heart of Millbrook, amidst its challenges and contradictions, Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell had become a beacon, a reminder that one voice, spoken with courage, could change everything. The seasons changed, and with each passing day, the small town of Millbrook slowly began to heal from the wounds that had long been hidden beneath its quiet surface. For Sarah Mitchell, the battle had moved beyond the courtroom and the military base. It was now about rebuilding trust and forging a future where silence no longer meant safety for the guilty. The early morning fog hung low over the training grounds. As Sarah stepped out to oversee a new initiative she had pushed for mandatory ethics and transparency workshops for all ranks at the base. It was a small step, but she believed in starting with education. If the culture was to change, it had to begin here. As she walked among the recruits, she noticed Private Jamie Lewis practicing his drills with renewed focus. Jamie had grown since she first met him, more confident, more aware. She stopped beside him, offering a nod of encouragement. "Keep at it, Jamie. You're doing good work." He smiled shyly. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I'm trying." Their brief exchange reminded Sarah of why she endured so much hardship. The future was in the hands of young soldiers like Jamie, and they deserved better than the broken system she had inherited. Despite the progress, not everyone welcomed the changes. The base's old guard still wielded influence, and covert resistance simmered beneath the surface. There were moments when Sarah sensed eyes watching her with suspicion, whispers trailing behind her like shadows. One afternoon, during a meeting with several senior officers, the tone grew tense when she proposed a new policy to protect whistleblowers from retaliation. Colonel Davis, a man known for his traditional views, spoke bluntly. "Lieutenant Mitchell, this is a military base, not a social club. Discipline and order come first. Encouraging soldiers to speak out openly might undermine our authority." Sarah met his gaze evenly. "Respectfully, sir. Discipline built on fear and silence breeds corruption. We need to build a culture where integrity is valued over blind obedience." The room fell silent, the weight of her words hanging heavy in the air. Some officers exchanged uneasy glances. Others avoided eye contact altogether. General Bradford finally broke the silence. "The lieutenant makes a valid point. We must adapt if we want this base to move forward." Though the resistance was real, Sarah knew that persistence was key. Slowly, the tide was turning. Outside the base, life in Millbrook was also shifting. Sarah's family felt the subtle changes. Neighbors began offering greetings instead of cold shoulders, and local shops displayed signs supporting the reforms she championed. One evening, Sarah attended a town meeting where residents discussed the future of their community. A handful of voices still clung to the old ways, hesitant to accept the revelations that had rocked their world. But more were eager for healing and progress. When Sarah stood to speak, her voice carried the quiet strength that had become her hallmark. "We all want a safe, honest community," she said. "It won't be easy, but by facing the truth together, we can build something better." The applause that followed was warm, sincere, a testament to how far she had come. However, Sarah's personal sacrifices weighed heavily. The relentless pressure, the constant scrutiny, and the lingering threats took a toll on her well-being. Late at night, she often found herself restless, memories of the past mingling with fears for the future. Her mother remained her anchor. During one of their quiet conversations, Sarah confessed, "Sometimes I wonder if I'm enough, if I can carry all this." Her mother smiled softly. "You are stronger than you realize, Sarah. Remember, strength isn't just about fighting battles. It's about knowing when to lean on others." That night, Sarah allowed herself to rest in the comfort of family, gathering the strength she needed for the road ahead. At the base, a new challenge emerged. A scandal involving a junior officer's misconduct threatened to derail the progress made. The incident sparked outrage and skepticism about the reforms. Sarah was tasked with leading the internal review. It was a delicate situation, balancing accountability with the need to maintain morale and trust. She approached the investigation with transparency and fairness, determined to demonstrate that no one was above the standards she helped set. Process was painful, exposing lingering fractures within the ranks. But it also reinforced the importance of the culture shift. When the findings were released, Sarah addressed the base with honesty. "We must hold ourselves to the highest standards. Accountability isn't just a policy, it's a commitment to each other." Her words resonated, reaffirming her leadership. As the year drew to a close, Sarah reflected on how much had changed since the day she refused to salute. What had started as a solitary act of defiance had blossomed into a movement that challenged an entire system. She knew the journey was far from over. There would be setbacks, resistance, and moments of doubt. But she had learned that true strength came not from perfection, but from resilience. In the quiet moments before dawn, standing on the balcony of her home overlooking Millbrook, Sarah allowed herself a moment of peace. The town was waking up. The world was moving forward, and she was ready to face whatever came next, because she had learned that the courage to speak the truth, even when it seemed impossible, could change everything. The winter air was crisp, and snow dusted the quiet streets of Millbrook, a soft blanket over a town still healing from the wounds Sarah's courage had uncovered. The holidays brought a sense of reflection and renewal, and for Sarah, an unexpected opportunity. General Bradford invited her to a strategic planning session, aiming to build a new task force dedicated to rooting out corruption and fostering accountability within the entire military district. It was a significant step, one that recognized the deep changes needed beyond their small base. Sitting around the polished conference table, Sarah listened as senior officers debated budgets, logistics, and political challenges. Though she was the youngest and least experienced in the room, her voice carried weight. "We can't just react to problems after they happen," she said firmly. "We need preventative measures, education, transparent reporting systems, and support for those who come forward." Some officers nodded, others resisted, but her steady conviction began to shift the conversation. Outside the formal meetings, Sarah continued her work mentoring young soldiers, nurturing their confidence and integrity. Private Jamie Lewis had become a standout, eager, sharp, and willing to challenge the status quo. One afternoon, Jamie approached her after training, a nervous excitement in his voice. "Lieutenant, I want to report something. I overheard some senior guys planning to hide misconduct. They think no one's watching." Sarah's heart quickened. This was exactly the kind of courage she had fought to inspire. "Thank you for telling me, Jamie. We'll handle this carefully." Together, they began a quiet investigation, collecting evidence while protecting Jamie's identity. That the tension at the base intensified as the investigation unfolded. Sarah knew this would test the reforms she had helped establish and the resilience of those who supported change. Late one night, while reviewing documents, Sarah's phone buzzed with an anonymous message. "Stop digging or you'll regret it." The threat was chilling, but did not deter her. Instead, it steeled her resolve. She shared the message with General Bradford, who reassured her. "You're not alone in this, Mitchell. We'll see it through." As the truth came to light, several officers were suspended pending further inquiry. The scandal rocked the base again, but also reaffirmed the necessity of transparency. Sarah's leadership through the crisis earned her the respect of many who had doubted her before. Back in Millbrook, the town's attitude toward the military base had shifted. Community meetings now included open forums where civilians and soldiers discussed mutual concerns. Sarah often attended these gatherings, bridging gaps and fostering dialogue. At one such meeting, an elderly veteran approached her. "You're the reason I still believe in this place," he said quietly. "Thank you." His words touched Sarah deeply, a reminder of the real impact of her efforts. Despite the progress, Sarah faced personal challenges. The relentless pressure affected her relationships and health. Her mother noticed the toll and encouraged her to seek balance. "I'm proud of you, Sarah," her mother said one evening. Don't forget to take care of yourself." Sarah nodded, realizing that self-care was part of the strength she needed to continue. The new year brought fresh opportunities. Sarah was asked to speak at a regional conference on military ethics and leadership. Standing before an audience of seasoned officers and civilians, she shared her story, not as a tale of victory, but as a journey of resilience, hope, and the ongoing fight for justice. Her message was simple but powerful. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's the choice to act in spite of it. The applause was warm and sustained. Sarah felt the weight of years of struggle lifting, replaced by a quiet confidence. Returning home, Sarah found a letter from Captain Reynolds' widow. The note expressed sorrow for the pain caused and a hope for healing. Sarah folded the letter carefully, feeling a complex mix of emotions: closure, empathy, and resolve. Her journey had never been about revenge. It was about truth, justice, and the possibility of redemption for all. As spring began to thaw Millbrook's landscape, Sarah looked ahead with cautious optimism. The road was still long, and the work far from finished. But with every step, she was carving a path toward a future where honor and integrity were more than ideals. They were reality. And in that future, she vowed, no one's courage would go unnoticed or unheard again. The sun rose slowly over Millbrook, casting a warm golden light across the quiet streets. After years of struggle, sacrifice, and hard-won victories, Sarah Mitchell stood at a new beginning, one shaped by the strength she had found within. Herself and the community she had helped rebuild. The military base buzzed with activity, but the atmosphere was different now. Gone were the days of hushed secrets and unspoken fears. The halls echoed with honest conversations, respect, and a shared commitment to doing what was right. Sarah, now a respected leader, walked confidently through the corridors. Soldiers greeted her warmly. Young recruits looked up to her as a role model, and even some of the older officers had softened, their resistance giving way to cautious acceptance. One afternoon, Sarah was called to the base's main conference. Room for a special ceremony. General Bradford stood at the podium, his face serious but proud. Today, we recognize Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell for her extraordinary courage, integrity, and leadership, he announced. Her unwavering commitment to truth has transformed this base and inspired us all. The room erupted in applause. Sarah's heart swelled with a quiet pride, not for the recognition, but for what it represented, a turning point. As she stepped forward to receive a commendation, her eyes scanned the room and found familiar faces, some skeptical at first, now fully supportive. She thought back to the moment she refused to salute, the whispers, the isolation. All that pain had led to this. After the ceremony, Sarah spoke privately with General Bradford. "You've done more than I ever expected," he said, shaking her hand firmly. "Thank you." She smiled, feeling the full weight of his respect. "I couldn't have done it without the support of people willing to stand beside me." Outside, the town of Millbrook was celebrating its own renewal. The local diner where Sarah's story had once been whispered was now adorned with posters honoring her courage. Families gathered, sharing stories of the past and hopes for the future. Sarah visited the diner, greeted warmly by neighbors who once doubted her. A small child tugged at her sleeve. "Are you the lady who told the truth?" The child asked wide-eyed. Sarah knelt down, smiling gently. "Yes, and it's always important to speak up for what's right." That evening, Sarah sat on her porch with her mother, the sky ablaze with stars. They reflected on the journey, the battles fought, the sacrifices made, and the hope that had emerged. Her mother reached out, squeezing Sarah's hand. "You've changed everything, Sarah. Not just for yourself, but for everyone?" Sarah nodded, tears brimming. "It wasn't easy, but I'd do it again, because silence is the real enemy." In the weeks that followed, Sarah received messages from people she'd never met, veterans, soldiers, civilians, all sharing how her courage had inspired them to stand up, speak out, and demand justice. She realized her story was no longer just hers. It belonged to all who believed in the power of truth. But Sarah's fight was not just in the past. She continued to work tirelessly, mentoring, advocating, and ensuring that the changes she helped bring about would endure. She forged partnerships between the base and community organizations, creating support networks for those affected by injustice. Her vision was clear, a future where respect, dignity, and honor were the foundation of service. One quiet morning, as Sarah prepared for another day, she found a letter in her mailbox. It was from an old friend, a soldier who had once doubted her, now thanking her for opening his eyes. She smiled, folding the letter carefully. Her journey had taught her that change was possible, even in the face of fear and resistance. As she stepped outside, the town of Millbrook basked in the soft glow of dawn, a symbol of hope and renewal. Sarah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past and the promise of tomorrow. She was no longer just a lieutenant who refused to salute. She was a beacon of courage, a champion of justice, and a living testament to the power of one voice. And with that voice, she would continue to change the world, one step at a time.